A small hand slips from a mother's grip as a thick, yellow wall of grease swallows a screaming child in the heart of London. It is midday in 1880, but the sun is a bruised, purple ghost lost behind a curtain of industrial filth. The air tastes like charred copper and rotten eggs, a heavy mixture of sulfur and soot that settles on the tongue like a wet blanket. People move like specters through the gloom, their faces pressed into vinegar-soaked rags to filter out the stinging haze. Every breath feels like swallowing hot needles as the chemical mist dissolves the lining of the lungs. Above them, the massive chimneys of the East End roar with fire, vomiting black ink into a sky that has forgotten the color blue. London is no longer a city of stone and brick, but a gargantuan machine fueled by 1 million domestic hearths and thousands of roaring factories. The British Empire reaches across 3 continents, but its beating heart is drowning in a sea of its own waste products and coal smoke. Soft sea coal, cheap and rich in sulfur, burns in every basement and bedroom, heating the homes of 4 million souls. As the hot smoke hits the cold, damp air of the Thames River, it creates a terrifying hybrid known to the residents as a pea-souper. This is not the natural mist of the countryside, but a man-made chemical weapon that traps heat and moisture beneath a lid of toxic carbon. Progress has a physical weight, and it is crushing the capital. The darkness is so absolute that gas lamps appear only as faint greenish orbs that illuminate nothing but a few inches of swirling grime. A carriage driver climbs down from his seat, leading his horse by the bridle, but he cannot see his own feet through the dense, oily smog. Somewhere in the distance, a massive steam engine groans, its vibrations rattling the windows of tenements where families huddle in the suffocating dark. The soot sticks to everything, coating the skin in a layer of greasy black dust that ruins silk dresses and stains the white collars of clerks. Even inside the grandest palaces, the fog seeps through the cracks in the doors, filling the halls with the smell of a gutter on fire. Scientists of the 19th century watch with growing horror as the city undergoes a radical atmospheric transformation that defies the laws of nature. The coal smoke contains microscopic particles of soot that act as tiny anchors for the moisture in the air, creating droplets that never evaporate. This toxic sludge creates an acidic reaction, turning the moisture into a dilute form of sulfuric acid that eats away at the very fabric of London. It dissolves the limestone of the Great Bell and erodes the ornate carvings on the faces of statues until they resemble melting wax figures. The city is literally being digested by its own air, a slow-motion chemical fire that consumes both the architecture of power and the fragile bodies of the working poor. Inside the wards of St. Bartholomew's Hospital, the air is thick with the rhythmic, wet sound of 1,000 people struggling for a single breath. Doctors move through the halls with lanterns, their eyes stinging and red from the smoke that has invaded the building through every open chimney. They perform delicate surgeries by the flickering light of candles because the gas pipes are choked with ice and the midday sun has been extinguished. Every cough brings up a dark, viscous phlegm that the nurses call the London Rose, a grim signature of the coal dust settling deep inside the chest. There is no cure for this industrial plague, only the desperate hope that a stray wind will finally push the poisonous curtain out toward the sea. In the year 1873, the fog reaches a point of total saturation that turns the city into a vast, silent graveyard. For one entire week, the visibility drops to 0, and the death rate in the capital spikes by 40% as the weak and the elderly vanish. This is the moment the romantic myth of the London mist dies, replaced by the terrifying reality of a collective, urban suffocation event. Funeral carriages become lost on their way to the cemeteries, their drivers wandering in circles while the stench of the smog overpowers the smell of the dead. The government counts the bodies, but refuses to extinguish the fires of industry, for coal is the black gold that pays for the empire. At the Smithfield Cattle Show, the most prized animals in the kingdom begin to collapse in their pens, their massive lungs failing in the acrid air. These powerful bulls, bred for their strength and size, wheeze and foam at the mouth as the sulfuric acid in the fog sears their throats. Farmers watch in disbelief as their fortunes die on the straw, suffocated by the very progress that was supposed to make them wealthy men. One massive ox groans and falls, its eyes rolling back as it tries to suck oxygen from a room filled with nothing but cold, gray carbon. Even the beasts of the field cannot survive the environment that humans have built, proving that the industrial dream is a biological nightmare for every living creature. As the visibility vanishes, a new kind of predator emerges from the shadows to exploit the total blindness of the Victorian Metropolitan Police Force. Criminal organizations known as the Foghole Gangs use the toxic haze as a perfect cloak for high-stakes robberies and daring escapes in broad daylight. A gentleman can be stripped of his gold watch and silk coat in a crowded street, and his attacker will disappear into the yellow wall before a scream can even be heard. The fog provides an absolute anonymity that shatters the social order, allowing the desperate and the violent to reclaim the streets from the wealthy. Law and order dissolve into the mist, and the city becomes a chaotic frontier where the only rule is the reach of a knife. In the halls of Parliament, the powerful coal lobby ensures that no legislation is passed to restrict the black clouds pouring from the factory chimneys. They argue that the smoke is a sign of prosperity, a visible manifestation of British genius and the undisputed power of the global steam economy. To stop the smoke would be to stop the trains, the ships, and the very flow of capital that keeps the pound sterling dominant. Members of the House of Commons sit in their green leather chairs, their own lungs turning black, while they vote against air quality regulations. They choose the gold of the mine over the health of the child, convincing themselves that the darkness is a necessary sacrifice for the survival of the great imperial project. An entire generation of London children grows up in a twilight world where they have never seen the true color of a summer sky. They suffer from a mysterious softening of the bones that the doctors call rickets, caused by a total lack of sunlight in the narrow streets. Their legs bow and their spines twist because the thick oily canopy above them blocks the essential ultraviolet rays of the distant invisible sun. They play in the gutters, their faces smeared with soot, breathing in a cocktail of lead and arsenic that stunt their growth and dim their minds. To these infants of the machine age, the sun is merely a folktale, something their grandparents described as a bright yellow disk that once lived in the heavens above. The fog does not merely stay in the air, but falls as a black rain that poisons the soil and the water of the entire Thames Basin. The river itself becomes a thick, slow-moving soup of chemicals and ash, where the fish die and the plants rot into a greasy, gray sludge. Every building in London is coated in a layer of carbon that is inches thick in some places, turning the white marble of history into a charred ruin. The very chemistry of the earth is changing as millions of tons of ancient, buried coal are released into the atmosphere in a single human lifespan. This is the first great environmental catastrophe of the modern era, a warning from the earth that the price of fire is always paid in blood. Claude Monet stands on the balcony of the Savoy Hotel, his brushes moving frantically as he tries to capture the shifting, iridescent colors of the toxic mist. He finds a strange, haunting beauty in the way the sunlight refracts through the layers of smog, turning the sky into shades of violet and orange. To the artist, the fog is a masterpiece of light and shadow, but to the people on the street, it is a suffocating shroud of death. He captures the silhouette of the Houses of Parliament, a dark and jagged tooth rising from a sea of lavender poison and golden sulphurous haze. He is painting the funeral of a city, though the world will one day view these images as a romantic tribute to a time of great elegance. By the end of the 19th century, the romantic notion of the London fog begins to crumble under the sheer weight of the mounting death tolls. The public no longer sees the smoke as a symbol of wealth, but as a silent intruder that steals their children and murders their elderly in the night. Newspaper editors begin to demand action, publishing terrifying statistics that link the frequency of the pea-soupers directly to the rising numbers of respiratory failures. The city is reaching a breaking point where the human cost of the Industrial Revolution is finally outweighing the silver profits of the factory owners. A slow, agonizing realization is dawning on the British people that they have built a civilization that is physically incapable of sustaining human life for the long term. A lone lamplighter moves through the streets of Whitechapel, his long pole reaching for the gas lanterns that line the narrow, smoke-filled cobblestone alleys. He is a man who knows the city by touch and sound, for his eyes are perpetually clouded by the stinging, yellow grease of the fog. He hears the muffled coughs from behind locked doors and the rattling breath of the horses that stand shivering in the damp, freezing darkness. His work is almost useless, for the light he provides can only penetrate a few feet of the chemical gloom before it is swallowed by the carbon. He is the last guardian of a world that is slowly disappearing into the shadows, a witness to the final, gasping breaths of a century that traded light for heat. The Victorian era passes, but the legacy of the smoke remains, a dark inheritance that will continue to haunt the city well into the next century. The transition to electricity is slow, and the addiction to coal is a habit that the nation cannot seem to break, even as the sky darkens further. Every winter brings a new wave of the yellow mist, each one a grim reminder that the systems of the past are still dictating the health of the present. The stage is being set for one final catastrophic event that will force the hand of the government and change the laws of the land forever. The city is a ticking time bomb of respiratory failure, waiting for the perfect weather conditions to turn the entire capital into one massive, airtight gas chamber. An official at the Registrar General's office dips his pen into the ink and records another 300 names in the column for bronchitis and asthma. He notes that the majority of the deceased are under the age of 5 or over the age of 60, the most vulnerable victims of the city. His hand is tired from the constant repetition of these dark entries, a never-ending chronicle of a city that is slowly but surely killing its own people. Outside his window, the yellow fog presses against the glass like a hungry animal, waiting to claim more souls from the crowded streets of the East End. He knows that as long as the coal keeps burning, his ledger will never be empty, and the black rain will continue to fall on the cold stones. The infrastructure of London is a labyrinth of pipes, tunnels, and chimneys that are all designed to funnel the waste of 4 million people into the atmosphere. The sewers run with chemical runoff from the tanneries and the gasworks, while the air carries the heavy metals and the toxic gases of the steel mills. There is no escape from the industrial cycle, for the very water the people drink is filtered through the soot that falls from the leaden skies. The city is a closed loop of pollution, where every element of the environment has been corrupted by the relentless drive for production and the pursuit of empire. It is a terrifying experiment in human endurance, a testament to how much poison a population can absorb before the entire social structure finally collapses. A young messenger boy runs through the maze of the city, his lungs burning as he tries to deliver an urgent telegram to a merchant in Cheapside. He loses his way in the swirling yellow haze and finds himself standing at the edge of the dark Thames, the water invisible beneath the smog. He can hear the heavy splashing of a ship nearby, but he cannot see the hull or the sailors who are shouting through the gloom. He feels a sudden sharp panic as the air thickens, the sulfurous taste becoming so strong that he begins to gag and choke on the mist. He is a tiny figure in a massive, indifferent machine, a child of the fog who knows that the darkness is his only home and his greatest enemy. Modern analysis of the Victorian fog reveals a terrifying chemical cocktail of lead, arsenic, and mercury that was being inhaled by every resident of the capital. These heavy metals settled into the soil and the floorboards of the homes, creating a toxic legacy that would last for many decades after the coal stopped burning. The fog was not just a nuisance. It was a delivery system for some of the most dangerous substances known to 19th century science and industrial chemistry. It poisoned the blood and the brains of the population, leading to a host of neurological and physical ailments that the doctors of the time could not understand. The city was a living laboratory for the long-term effects of heavy metal poisoning, and the results were written in the stunted growth of its citizens. A widow in a black veil kneels at a fresh grave in Highgate Cemetery, her tears mixing with the gray soot that settles on the cold, damp marble. Her husband was a healthy man of 40, but the great fog of 1880 took his breath and his life in a single week. She looks around at the thousands of other headstones that are disappearing into the yellow haze, a silent army of the fallen who paid the price for progress. She wonders if the gold in the banks and the power of the empire are truly worth the empty chairs and the broken hearts of the people. She stands and disappears into the mist, her black dress blending with the darkness until she is nothing but a memory in the heavy, silent air. The final realization that the fog is a man-made disaster leads to a slow and agonizing shift in the political landscape of the entire British nation. The people began to organize, forming societies for the prevention of smoke and demanding that the government take responsibility for the quality of the air. It is the beginning of the modern environmental movement, a struggle for the right to breathe that will take another 50 years to reach its full potential. The Victorian fog is the crucible in which our modern understanding of industrial responsibility and public health is forged, a dark and painful lesson in the dangers of unchecked growth. The city that once took pride in its smoke is finally beginning to realize that the light of the sun is the most valuable resource of all. Today, the blue skies over London are a hard-won victory over the shadows of the past, a testament to the power of law and the resilience of life. The massive coal-fired factories are gone, replaced by glass towers and green parks that hide the dark history of the ground upon which they are built. But beneath the surface, the lead and the mercury of the 19th century still remain, a silent record of the time when the air was death. We look back at the Victorian fog with a mix of horror and fascination, a reminder that every industrial revolution comes with a hidden cost that is paid by the poor. The sun finally shines on the Thames, but the memory of the darkness lingers, a ghost in the machine of our modern, brightly lit world.